Hello learners of the Postgraduate Diploma in Environmental and Occupational Health. I introduce myself as Dr. Sushmita Bhaskar, working at Indira Gandhi National Open University. In this session, we will discuss about aquaculture and its pollution. And this forms a part of the course MEVE 003, that is Agricultural Sector, in this program of the Postgraduate Diploma in Environmental and Occupational Health. So aquaculture, okay, all of you may be familiar with this term. Just like in agriculture, we are growing the crops like wheat or rice or paddy and several other forms of the vegetables and the fruits in your agricultural fields and the farms. Aquaculture involves the cultivation of the fishes, that is, it could be the freshwater prawn, the crustacean, the algae, and also the mollusk species which are belonging to the phylum Mollusca. All this is coming under the term aquaculture farming, and this is also referred to as aqua farming. So many of them, especially those who are staying in the coastal regions, for example in the Andaman. So here they are growing some special type of even sea crabs, and they can also export them both for the ornamental reasons and also some of them for the other consumption purposes. In the same way, the freshwater prawn, this is also a very popular fish and the species which are used in the cuisine in the coastal areas, for example in Kerala and also in West Bengal. People are fond of a very particular variety of the fishes. So all this comes under the aquaculture, cultivation of the fishes, the crustaceans, the algae and the mollusk species, that is coming under the phyla, and all this is referred to as the aqua farming. Then in the same way, oyster cultivation is also done. Okay, from the oysters you even get the pearl. So oyster cultivation also, so that is all done for the ornamental reasons, for jewelry and certain other economic activities. Aquaculture in turn is the propagation and rearing of the aquatic organisms in controlled or selected aquatic environment for any commercial, recreational or the public purpose. Mariculture, this is also a specialized branch of aquaculture, and that involves the cultivation of the marine organisms, especially for food and for other products, particularly in the open ocean and an enclosed section of the ocean, or even in the tanks, in the ponds that are filled with the seawater. Now this type of the culture, this involves the farming of the marine fish, including finfish and shellfish like the prawns, or oysters and also the seaweed in the saltwater ponds. Some examples of the non-food product that are produced by the mariculture, they include the fish meal, the nutrient agar, then the jewelry, that is in the cultured pearls, because many of you are fond of wearing the pearl necklaces or the pearl chains. So where is all this coming from? So from one type of the aquaculture and the mariculture, we can even go in for such kind of activities. And also sometimes in the case of cosmetics, like you have the seaweed. Okay, so these seaweeds are actually grown and they can be used in your moisturizers, in the creams and even in the face packs and so on, so that they will absorb the oil. Let me tell you, in the very olden days, okay, even Cleopatra and many other princesses and queens in those times, in the ancient times, they were actually using the mud, the clay and all these sediments and deposits from such marine environments from the oceans, and then they were applying this. They were also using this for various other cosmetic purposes. So this itself, it has certain purifying properties and it has certain skin rejuvenating properties. So these are all being used now commercially, also they are being used for the manufacture of these cosmetics. Fish. So we all know that fish is a very good source of good quality protein. It has lipids and it has a variety of the essential nutrients. So that is why they say that when you have a good amount of fish or even fish oil, if you are consuming that, then that gives you good quality hair and it is a good source of the vitamin B, okay, and even your eyesight also improves because there is a lot of vitamin A. So this is giving you a very good quality protein in the human beings. The production of the farmed fish or the aquaculture, this is probably the fastest growing food sector worldwide, and it now accounts for nearly 40% of the world fish production. As indicated by the Food and Agriculture Organization, Aquaculture is comprehended to mean the cultivating of the oceanic life forms. This includes the fish, the mollusks, the shellfish and also the amphibian plants. Then specific sorts of the aquaculture, they incorporate the fish cultivating, shrimp cultivating, because shrimp is also being used. Then the shellfish cultivating, mariculture, in algae culture, kelp cultivating. So kelp also you would have known about this. This is also used in shampoos and in conditioners. This is also supposed to give you very good benefits for the hair and for the skin. So kelp cultivating is also done, and also the development of decorative fish. Okay, because in this also you have the ornamental varieties of the fish, which can also be done by using aquaculture techniques. Now specific strategies, they incorporate the aquaponics and the coordinated multi-trophic aquaculture, both of which are using the fish and the plant cultivating techniques. Sources of the aquaculture pollutant. Now the concerns, the impacts of consistently expanding the aquaculture on the surrounding oceanic biological community. This is one of the major impacts, because when we are doing this aquaculture on a large scale, then it is possible that we are giving some fish feed, and then we are also using some kind of the nutrient enhancers for growing these fishes. So all this can actually pollute the ocean environment, that pond or the lake ecosystem, and subsequently that can also have the impacts on the surrounding oceanic biological community, because in that area there may be other occupants, there may be other fishes or other kind of the marine organisms which are inhabiting those waters, and they can be indirectly affected due to this. Then again, escalating the fish and the shrimp cultivating. This will also add to eutrophication, because more and more of, if you are adding any kind of the nutrient enhancers which contain nitrogenous material or the phosphates, then that can also lead to the eutrophication, where you know what is eutrophication and eutrophic lake, and this can then lead to the algal blooms that can also result in the depletion of the dissolved oxygen, which is very much required for the survival of the fishes and the other aquatic organisms which are thriving there, both the flora and the fauna, and thereby that can deplete all the dissolved oxygen and leading to eutrophic conditions and waters. Now the nitrogenous mixes, this can include alkali, nitrite, nitrate, and they are all considered as real contaminants in the aquaculture wastewaters. Marine aquaculture. So this usually consists of both the land-based and the offshore aquaculture. Offshore culture, this is mostly done in shallow seas, mud flats and also protected bays. The main production of the offshore aquaculture, this includes the floating and semi-floating raft culture, net cage culture and vertical hanging culture. Pond culture. Now this is one of the most important methods and mainly among the freshwater aquaculture techniques. Along the reservoir, for example lakes and also the rivers and the channels, okay, which are there, all here the fish farming that can contribute to the remaining fresh aquatic production forms. So all these sources, culturing in all these sources, that will definitely generate a large amount of waste and cause the contamination of these waters and become polluted in the process. Aquaculture waste, if we talk about this specifically, this can include all the material that are used in the process which are not removed from the system during the harvesting. So these waste are consisting of the consumed food or the uneaten feed which we are giving to the fishes, then the excreta, the chemicals that are being applied there, the therapeutic agents, because we can even give certain antibiotics which are added, and this can also cause certain antibiotic resistance among the other species. So that is also added to the ponds. They are all discharged either in the sediments or also in the farm effluents. The effluent will both contain the dissolved and the particulate pollutants, both the inorganic as well as the organic forms. An aquatic farm water quality, this depends mainly upon the type of species cultivated. So that is depending upon the species. Now other pollutants will include the nutrients, then obviously the biological oxygen demand, the total suspended solids. All this is derived from the feed, from the excreta and also from the fertilizers. The fertilizers, they will stimulate the phytoplankton growth and also the fish production. So here again we can go on to the biofertilizers or the biomanures, but then some synthetic fertilizers are also being used. In the same way, inorganic compounds of the nitrogen and the phosphorus, they are also among the usual fertilizers, but potassium, trace metals and silicates, they may also be present. Now, since fertilizers are increasing the concentration of the nutrients in the pond water, they may cause eutrophication also in the water bodies. Then we also have the pesticide, the heavy metal and emerging pollutants. All this is used in intensive aquaculture and they are some of the sources of the pollutant. Let me tell you, when you are farming out of interest and you just want some amount or a little amount of that population to feed your own family or feed a small community in the local way, then in that case you will not be doing a very intensive form of the aquaculture. But when you are into the import export business and you are taking it to a large scale, then definitely you want in a very short period of time you want larger production, then you will be using all these synthetic or the chemical forms of the pesticides, of the fertilizers, and from this you will get several types of the heavy metals which are entering the water, and all these are really a source of concern and they are sources of pollutant. So, the heavy metals can also be found in the pond effluents because they are common constituents of the proteinates and the vitamin and the mineral premixes. For example, copper and zinc is normally present in the aquaculture waters and effluents. Now, some are also added as the oxidizing agents in the water, that is basically for controlling certain pathogenic organisms or those organisms which are disease causing organism. We do not require them in those aquaculture farm. In the same way, there can be certain unwanted weeds that are growing or certain phytoplankton which are undesirable. I mean, you do not want that. So, for that purpose, we are adding certain oxidizing agents that could include the potassium permanganate or certain algicides, for example, the copper sulfate forms. So, this again that will also enter the water and they are also a form of the contaminants and causing pollution. Intensive fish farming. So, this can also be a source of hormone. Natural endocrine disrupting compounds are found in the natural water. So, now you will all be knowing about the hormone fluctuations in the hormones can cause a lot of problems in the human health, also in the animal health. And there are a lot of these compounds, it could be certain heavy metals, it could be the the estrogens and certain other steroids which can also mimic the normal hormones in our body, and they can also be the endocrine disruptors, and then they cause a large amount of problems with the human health. Then steroids are also found in the blood plasma of the fishes. And how these steroids are entering the water? Because they are excreted through the urine of the fishes, through their bile, and especially also when they are in the form of the reproduction time. So, that period, the breeding, the reproduction time, all these steroids will also be liberated into these waters. So, these contents are also seen in the aquaculture effluent. So, now from this you have seen that how much, though we are thinking that aquaculture it is a form of farming, and it is very nice to see to our eyes also, because whenever you go to these coastal areas and these water bodies, and when you see that these are being grown, it is very nice to understand the type of farming, but there are a lot of the problems that are involved, and mainly environmental pollution we have to take that into consideration, because now you have seen what are the different types of the contaminants and the pollutants that can enter these from the different sources that we are using to rear this itself, okay, and some can be the natural hormones that are secreted by the fishes themselves. The feed practices. So, one important thing and the major expense for the farmer is choosing the type of the feed, that is the fish feed. So, for any organism to live, even human beings, any animal, any plant, you definitely have to give some kind of a protein, carbohydrates, some fat. So, you need some feed which has to be given for that to grow and develop well. So, the fish feed, we have to see the cost practices, best management practices, sustainable management practices, all these have to be taken into account. So, the good feed administration, this should focus on, it should lessen the cost, enhance the cultivation, and it should also guarantee solid development of that fish stock which is involved. So, it is important in order to use a right sustaining technique for the practices involved, computing the feeding cost and also the cost of the fish cultivation. The nutrients that are required for the fish. So, the fish is also this is belonging to the Pisces. In this itself, if you see that they require a lot of protein, they require fat, starch, vitamins, minerals, all these are the fundamental supplements which are required for the growth. Even at home, if you have a tank, a fish tank, okay, here also like every day you will be putting some kind of a fish feed. Otherwise, when you go on a vacation, you are going somewhere else, and then when you come back after 15 days or 20 days, then you see that the fishes are lethargic, and some of them may still survive that period and some of them may also drop down dead. So therefore, there are nutrients which are required by the fishes, and we need to also clean their cabin or those waters also frequently. So protein is definitely giving vitality, it is giving the strength to its muscles. Then you need carbohydrate, which is a source of energy, you need vitamins and the minerals, and dietary prerequisites of the fishes. This will also fluctuate with the type of the fishes that are involved, whether you are using the freshwater type of fish, whether you are using different other type of the fishes, the oysters, the shellfish or the shrimp, what is under the cultivation. And then it also depends upon the size of the fish, whether the smaller fish are there or it is slightly larger in size. Then the development stages are also important, and also their feeding habitats. So all these requirements vary from species to species. Now for instance, there are flesh eating fish, and these need the protein and the fat than the omnivorous and the herbivorous species. In the same way, the marine fishes, they require more protein than the freshwater fishes. The common fish feed which is used. So these fishes feed are normally in the form of the granules or pellets, and they provide a nutrition in a stable and concentrated form. And this also enables the fish to feed efficiently and grow to their full potential. They are then combined with other ingredients such as the vegetable protein, cereal grain, vitamin and mineral, and also formed into the feed pellets. And the pellet, this is also a fish feed technology, because granules, as I told, as you will all remember, granule is something called as a granular form, and pellets are something which is made into round pellets. The vegetarian feed. So this consists of the wheat grain, then that will consist of the rice inputs, that is the rice grains, the wheat, then the soya leftovers, then flour and the peanut cakes, and which is all appropriate for the freshwater fish, because as I told you, there can be omnivorous varieties, there can be the herbivorous varieties of the fishes. Then there are hatchery feeds. These are the specialized feed, and that is produced for the fish hatchery. In species such as salmon and trout, the newly hatched, they will initially feed from their yolk sac, and then they can be fed with the starter feeds. Trash fish. So one category of the trash fish, this includes the species that are normally not used for the human consumption, and they may normally be even discarded in the sea. And they are composed of the smaller fishes that are targeted for processing into the fish meal and the oil, or for the small scale rural aquaculture and also livestock raising. So that is what we mean by that terminology. Some of the examples that are included under this category, they include the chub mackerel and also the Japanese anchovy. They are the typical species that will fall under this. And those fishes that have become damaged during the fishing operation and even on board storage, they can also be categorized in this group, so that they are used sustainably, they are used in the proper way and not being discarded. Now there can be certain marine species, okay, and here they consume the nutrition in the yolk sac during the first few days after their hatching, and then they are fed for several weeks on using certain other fishes or certain other feeds. So these special feed which are given there, they can be used to enrich the nutritional value. And the rotifers are usually bred in the hatchery, and the brine shrimp, they are collected from the wild, for example from the salt lakes. Now let us discuss about the effects of the pollutants on the environment. So aquaculture is necessary to keep the overfishing under control, but it also negatively impacts the environment, and we have seen and listed the various contaminants that are entering these waters and how they can impact the environment. Eutrophication is a common issue that will always come up with the aquaculture, and eutrophication refers to the excess enrichment in a given ecosystem, and basically because of nitrogen and phosphorus. And aquaculture causes eutrophication in a number of ways. In the open water aquaculture system, the excess fish feed, that will introduce the extra nitrogen and phosphorus directly into the waters. And then the closed offline inland systems, they also contribute to the eutrophication as they dump the effluents directly into the natural waterways. So the emissions of the marine animal waste from the aquaculture facilities into the ecosystem, they will not only affect the other fishes, but they will also result in nutrient pollution. For example, one of the most harmful aquaculture system, it is from the net cage farming. It also involves the use of large mesh fishing nets to hold the farm fish, and there is no way to prevent the waste from escaping into the water. Now this waste that can contain certain antibiotics, pesticide residues, fish feces, okay, or the fish waste, the excreta, which will all pollute the open water, and it makes it totally unsafe for human drinking and potable purposes, recreational use, or even for other wildlife and recreational activities. Another negative impact is through discharge. The aquaculture waste, this can definitely be separated into the solid waste and the dissolved waste. The solid waste is derived from the uneaten food or the spilled feed that is given to the fishes. And dissolved waste, this is also coming from the metabolites excreted by the fish. So these two types of pollution, this will also harm and reduce the water quality of that particular system, whether it is pond, lake, or the open waters, and it will lead to an influx of the disease carrying fishes. Aquaculture will also lead to the algal blooms. These are toxic to the humans and animals and can make local water unsafe for drinking, recreation, and they can also destroy the local wildlife. Natural wetland capacities that can also be reduced due to the aquaculture practices. Because if you see even a natural wetland ecosystem, here again people like to go there even for the ecotourism purposes. You would like to go in those wading waters using small canoes or the boats, which are again sustainably, where you can row the boats. So even that all will be stopped due to this kind of the aquaculture practices, which are destroying the local recreation and the wildlife. Then the aquaculture advancement, because as I told you, when they are doing the intensive farming, then that can harm the natural biogeochemistry of the wetland. Because finally you see that in nature all the elements, they have to be cycled, they have to be the biogeochemical cycling of the elements is very important to keep an ecosystem active and healthy. And when this is impacted, then there are a lot of the problems with the environmental health and also with the human health. Now again, when we talk about the effect of pollutants on the human health, the solid waste from the aquaculture, this will also contain from the fishes, as I told you, from their excreta, from the uneaten food, and this can also result in the oxygen depletion and ammonia toxicity when it decomposes. So this will also give a specific odor and the smell to those waters, and the water oxygen will be depleted, so that the other organisms will be impacted, because it is not only this fish or the fishes under cultivation which are of concern, but also the local entire biodiversity will then be affected. The urine and the feces from the aquatic animals, that can cause high increase in the biological oxygen demand. All this can lead to health impacts. A number of chemicals are used in the aquaculture industry in addition to the pesticides or the fertilizer. That includes certain materials which are coming from the construction material also, like stabilizers. There could be certain pigments which are used, also certain antifoulants which is added to the water. Also, the pigments that are incorporated into the feed, we are also using certain kind of disinfectants, and also chemotherapies also are being used. Then there are antimicrobials which are administered, that also ends up in the environment. So all these are causing ecological and human health disorders. These chemicals can also destroy the effective microbes and bring an imbalance in the aquatic ecology system. Now organochlorine pesticides, for example aldrin, endrin, dieldrin, chlordane, toxaphene, and many other kind of the compounds like dichlorodiphenyl, dichloroethane, trichloroethane, then you have the heptachlor epoxide, mirex. All this can cause a lot of dangers for a long time. They are persistent pesticides and chemicals. The natural contaminants are also there. For example, you have the polychlorinated biphenyls, dioxin deposits, and likewise they can also cause a variety of the health issues and health problems. Why do we use the antibiotics, and their usage and resistance also is one factor which is causing concern. So the antimicrobial substances, okay, this itself is saying that it is antimicrobial, and this is useful in the medication for the humans also. So we are actually using them in order to do away with certain pathogenic microorganisms, and we don't want them also to grow along with these aquaculture species. And these antimicrobials are additionally utilized for the aquaculture, and their utilization can be sorted as helpful and also as prophylactic. So, remedial utilization, they can relate in the treatment of the setup of the contamination, and metaphylaxis. This is also a term that is utilized for solutions for the mass medication of a group of animals in advance of an expected outbreak of disease. So, these are certain prophylactic measures that are taken, and prophylaxis itself, it implies the protection measures that are designed to preserve the health and prevent the spread of any disease. In aquaculture, the anti-infection, the antimicrobial agents, all these medications, they are lawfully utilized as a part of the aquaculture techniques, and they are definitely helpful. Now, there are certain organizations like you have the Food and the Drug Administration, FDA. So, these administrative organization, they will definitely set up the guidelines for the antimicrobial usage, how it has to be utilized, including the admissible dosage, the resistances, and also use by the species. They also include the measurement rate and also the constraint. So, definitely these organizations are involved, and they set up the guidelines which we have to definitely follow for the safe aquaculture practices. Now, if we have to give an example, in Norway, the utilization of antimicrobial, this requires a veterinarian's medicine. You need their help and their advice, and subsequently their utilization is helpful. And these are sold in the drug stores or in certain places which are approved by the Norwegian Medicine Agency, and it is also compulsory to report the measure of such anti-infection agents that are utilized. So, the serious fish cultivating, this has advanced the development of few bacterial illnesses, and that has driven to an expansion in the utilization of these antimicrobials. The current levels of antimicrobial usage globally in the aquaculture, these are right now difficult to decide in light of the fact that some of the nations have diverse frameworks, and they have their own guidelines and policies which are being followed. So, summarizing, my dear learners, in this session we understood about the aquaculture, what are the different aquaculture practices that we are following, and what are the type of fishes or the shrimp or the ornamental varieties that are being grown, and what are the kinds of feeds that are being given to these fishes for breeding them. And then we have also seen the type of the pollutants that are coming out from the aquaculture and how they are a cause of concern and they are causing environmental pollution. So, therefore, best industry practices, sustainable management and the aquaculture farming and fishing practices, this is very much important, and also the type of feed that is being used, and also intensive aquaculture practices should definitely take into account many of the sustainable management practices and the green management practices, where you can go for the biomanure or the biofertilizers. So, at least the amount of the waste will be reduced, and also the amount of feed that is also being given to the to that variety, that also needs to be decided, because overwhelming this thing by when you are applying too much of the feeds, that again can cause contamination of those waters. Thank you for your patient listening, and I hope you have had a good understanding of the same.